Oh Canada, freedom reigns.
I intend to resign as party leader, as prime minister.
Every Canadian trucker is rejoicing harder than Dan Campbell and Lions fans right now. With Trudeau out of the way, Polymarket puts Pierre Poilievre at over a 90% likelihood of becoming the next Prime Minister of Canada. And why am I sharing this? Because Pierre Poilievre is the Bitcoin candidate. He's fighting against government corruption, inflation, and for everyday people. Who here remembers when Canadian government officials froze people's bank accounts, seized their money, and deemed people who were sending Bitcoin to truckers as criminals? I'm saying this because Bitcoin is a freedom virus that's spreading to the provinces of Canada and globally. Remember, in 2 weeks, the first pro-Bitcoin US president is going to be sworn into office. But what happens when this freedom technology, Bitcoin, loses its freedom qualities? When salt becomes no longer salty? What happens when tens of millions of investors who believe they're being liberated through Bitcoin ETFs have their Bitcoin confiscated and stolen by BlackRock and the government? Today, we go through the implications of a BlackRock 6102 attack and how to protect yourself and your Bitcoin when it happens. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Let's go. ETF inflows have been absolutely insane the first 2 days of the year. Inflows reached almost $1 billion in both trading days. And it's because Bitcoin is quickly becoming the new benchmark for investors globally.
Bitcoin is also a very large asset with a very liquid market that is constantly trading. It's the most sensitive asset to global liquidity. And the younger generation is now using this as their benchmark. And their theory is that if you can't beat Bitcoin, you have to buy Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is the new benchmark. Only 4 hedge funds outperformed the S&P 500 in 2024, and none of them outperformed Bitcoin. One of the 4 hedge funds that outperformed the S&P 500 was Bridgewater, who laid off 7% of their workforce yesterday. Because hedge funds are starting to wake up to the reality. If you can't beat Bitcoin, just buy it.
And I own crypto. I own some Bitcoin.
That's right, Uncle Ray Ray. Yes, you do. I mean, even JP Morgan has shifted from Bitcoin being a hyped up fraud to now owning it and recommending it as a structurally important part of client portfolios. The richest people in the world 10 years from now will be Bitcoiners.
Sailor's built a big Bitcoin position. Elon can work his hardest and he can get to Mars and he can reduce the government spending and he can build a big bad rocket, do all these things. Sailor in Bitcoin terms is going to continue to eat away at him. And unless he kills his ego and starts stacking sats, he's not going to be able to outwork Bitcoin. I'm telling you, it's crazy once you realize you make more money sleeping than working, owning Bitcoin. It's really hard to outperform the best performing thing of all time, the scarcest thing of all time. It's a eye-opening thing.
And this is all fine and dandy, but I'm here to break the raw news to you guys. If you believe that you're going to be liberated through Bitcoin in the form of an ETF, then you're wrong. Owning Bitcoin ETFs is not owning Bitcoin. And BlackRock, the largest ETF issuer in the world, has signaled that they may rug pull all of their ETF holders for a digital asset that may not be Bitcoin or the most valuable. In the event of a hard fork of the Bitcoin network, the sponsor will, if permitted by the terms of the trust agreement, use its discretion to determine which network should be considered the appropriate network for the trust's purposes. There is no guarantee the sponsor will choose the digital asset that is ultimately the most valuable fork. The most valuable digital asset that there is Bitcoin. There is no second best. In simple terms, what this means is that BlackRock could confiscate real Bitcoin in the event of a hard fork or a change in Bitcoin's code and exchange it for another digital asset or Bitcoin-like token in order to satisfy what they deem might be appropriate for the trust. And they could also be co-opted by the government if it's deemed something of national importance. For those of you who think that BlackRock or the United States government couldn't or wouldn't confiscate your Bitcoin, you're absolutely naive. Number one, this has already been done before. In 1937, the United States government implemented a mandatory deduction from every paycheck, which is what we now know as the Social Security Act. This was not voluntary and you had no choice. In 1933, just a few years earlier, the United States president issued a Executive 6102 order, which allowed them to confiscate gold coins, gold bullion, and gold certificates for exchange at almost $20 an ounce to the Federal Reserve. This was done by threat of $10,000 fines, jail time, or both. This essentially allowed the government to expand the money supply because they didn't have the actual reserves that they needed in order to implement some of these social funding programs that they were doing at the time. And this isn't something that just happened 100 years ago. It happened in 2013 in Cyprus when over $10 billion worth of assets were seized by 2 Cyprus banks. And lest we forget, this also happened in Canada in 2022. And with ETFs, the ability to do this sort of thing would be quite simple. Did you know that a single exchange manages the custody of 9 of the 12 ETFs that are out there? That's one large honeypot. If it came down to it, the government could easily confiscate everyone's Bitcoin in the form of an ETF. Or number 2 could happen. Let's say that there was a hard fork in Bitcoin's code. Something like a quantum computer like Google Willow would be able to crack the ECDSA or SHA-256 encryption of Bitcoin. And then we might have to hard fork or update or change the code in order to implement new hashing algorithms that would protect people's private keys. Well, in the event that the Bitcoin network would decide to upgrade its software or implement those hard forks, BlackRock could say, well, now we're not going to exchange your tokens for Bitcoin Core or the ongoing Bitcoin consensus mechanism that we all use and all adopt. We're going to exchange it for a new BlackRock Bitcoin token, another digital asset. That's one controlled by us and could be also less valuable than real Bitcoin. The first obvious way to not give BlackRock or the government your Bitcoin is to never sell it. And that's been the core premise behind Ledn in their business model from the beginning. Ledn has been the go-to specialist in Bitcoin lending for over 6 years. They help clients unlock liquidity in dollars or their local currency without ever having to sell their Bitcoin. They've issued $6.5 billion worth of loans since 2018 for tens of thousands of customers. I've used the product myself. The loan process took about 2 minutes and my account was funded in less than 24 hours. No monthly payments, repay anytime. Go to ledn.io/borrowing in order to open your free account today and to borrow against your Bitcoin without ever having to sell it. The second primary way to not have your Bitcoin confiscated by the government is to take self-custody of your Bitcoin. But a lot of people are afraid of what that means. Am I going to lose all my Bitcoin? What are the implications of this? And that's exactly why our second sponsor, the Bitcoin Way, exists. Members of their team will walk you through proper 100% self-custody step by step so you can remove all of your counterparty risk. Stop sharing keys with third parties and ensure you protect your generational wealth the right way. We believe in self-custody here and want you to schedule a free consultation with their team at thebitcoinway.com. You won't regret it. The primary way that people were able to avoid fines in 1933, they removed their gold from banks and other counterparties and sought to protect and preserve their gold themselves. When I step back and look at the landscape of what's going on in the United States right now, with the United States debt soaring above $36 trillion and our unfunded liabilities growing by the second, the government has 2 options: print their way out or confiscate it. Here's option number 1.
That's why I say it's a little like the 06-07 time frame. I remember I had a buddy of mine that I worked with at the time, and he was, to his credit, was harping on the housing thing, harping on it. I mean, it was like to the point, it's like, all right, enough, dude. And so finally, I got so sick of hearing it. I turned around on the sales desk. I said, do you realize if what you're saying is right, the banking system could collapse, the consumer's going to die, but it was so far-fetched. And it's a little bit of that same thing where he and I didn't believe at the time because the outcome was so bad. Like, oh my God, if that happened. And the answer now, of course, was like, yeah, the banking system was going to collapse and they came in and they printed the money, etc. Like that was the right conclusion. Where I'm at now is the same thing. Is like, they're not going to cut the entitlements. They're going to print the money. And they're going to print the money with oil at 90 or 84 or wherever it is. And they're going to print the money with Bitcoin at 35,000. They're going to print the money. Like they're going to print the money. And people say they wouldn't do that because that means then they're going to have to do yield curve control. And that means that the U.S. inflation is going to look like Argentina. And it's like, yeah, that's what's going to happen.
Option number 2. Confiscate it from your citizens or from someone else through an act of war. The only problem with the second option, which was feasible in the old world, was that when you defeated someone in war, you would take their gold, their possessions, their land, their natural resources. One of the ways that you can't do that now is that people don't actually hold a ton of real gold. You would essentially be confiscating a digital copy of another currency that's worth less than the dollar. So what's another way that they could do this now? They could inflate the price of Bitcoin to $1 million a coin, and then they could confiscate it. And those who don't comply with this confiscation or supporting the US national government debt problem with their Bitcoin will be considered a crypto anarchist or a criminal.
First of all, calling self-custody crypto anarchism oversimplifies Bitcoin's innovation to empower the individual. Bitcoin's not about rejecting the government. From the highest form possible, Bitcoin is information. Bitcoin is text. Bitcoin is about free speech. Bitcoin is about property rights. Bitcoin is about the freedom to manage your own money, your own property, your own time, your own energy, your own labor, effort, your own future. The point is that you get to decide for the first time ever in human history, especially in modern human history, whether you want to trust and rely on anyone to store your time and energy, your money, your effort, your labor. It's drastic oversimplification to call it crypto anarchism, to elect and decide to take no counterparty risk to store, save, and exchange your labor, effort, and future.
Bitcoin is fundamentally about providing property rights and sovereignty to everyone. Its code shows no partiality and is freely available to anyone and everyone who would download it, use it, and partake of its benefits of providing digital property rights for anyone who wants to hold their private keys. Buying Bitcoin through FBTC or IBIT is one way to partake in the thesis that you believe that the price of Bitcoin will go up. It's not actually owning Bitcoin. It's a proxy, which is subject to a BlackRock or government 6102 attack. It can be exchanged for a token or something far less valuable. To protect yourself in this event, you need to take self-custody of your Bitcoin. Self-custody is like an umbrella. It's something that you would rather have and not need than need and not have it. Practice these skills now, get into community, and get some accountability so that you can own real Bitcoin and protect yourself from these sorts of things that BlackRock are putting out in the open for us all to see. You can learn the value of self-custody and level up your Bitcoin game by coming down to Dallas, Texas from April 3rd through April 6th to the BitBlockBoom conference. Learn about self-custody and buying Bitcoin in exclusive workshops, or just come because you want to hear some of the great speakers like Parker Lewis, Marty Bent, Guy Swan, Bob Burnett, Gary Leland, and me. Your all-inclusive ticket allows you to level up your education in Bitcoin, but also connect with your favorite Bitcoiners in real life at places like the Saturday Casino Night. Go to BitBlockBoom.com and enter the promo code BBB25 for $100 off your all-inclusive ticket. That's BBB25 for $100 off your all-inclusive ticket. I hope to see you all there, and I hope that you all take self-custody seriously. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.